Hello, and thank you for joining me on this special sustainable investing video. I'm joined in the studio by Julia Dreblow of SRI Services. Now, SRI Services is the UK's only independent company devoted entirely to advancing the retail, sustainable and responsible investment fund market. Julia, who heads up SRI Services, is an expert in the area, and Fidelity has partnered with her to bring our financial advisors a useful tool that helps with the categorization and classification of sustainable funds. The aim is to help you, financial advisors, help your individual investors understand how a fund is sustainable in its approach so that investors can better align their personal values with their investments. Julia, thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
Now, you've been working in this field since the early 1990s. Tell me a bit about your background and how you got to this point.
So I was very lucky. In 1991, when I was more or less first in the industry, I was working for a company called NPI, which launched one of the first funds in this market, one of the early funds. And I attended the launch presentation of it, was absolutely blown away. It completely made sense to me. Why on earth would anyone ever want to leave the things they cared about at home whilst making investment decisions? These things were clearly always going to be relevant in various different ways. So I went and asked them straight away if I could work with them. It wasn't that straightforward, but from there I then moved to Friends Provident, who many people watching this will have known of. They launched the first fund in this market in 1984, and I ran that side there for 12 years.
And then you went on to set up your own business, which is SRI. Tell me a bit more about the business and the classification tool that you've designed.
Sure. So SRI Services was really set up because I'd been working with financial advisors and other intermediaries for a really long time and knew that they didn't understand that at the heart of these funds were lots of different strategies that basically meant they were designed to do different things. So I set up a classification system that would help an IFA to get started with their conversation, to recognise that some funds focused on sustainability, others focused on environmental issues, others on social issues, and others were more about ethical issues. So those were four of the classifications. You've then got the classifications. Well, there's a smaller classification for faith-based funds because they're different, but they're really separate from other funds. So they've got a classification too. And then you've got other funds where they're really integrating environmental, social and governance and sustainability issues into their thinking, but they're not leading on those issues. So they may be tilting or they may be doing a bit of extra risk mitigation type work. So those funds we group together and on this tool we're calling them ESG weighted. So those are the funds that are going to have quite often some quite controversial stocks in them. But if you understand it's a weighting exercise rather than screening out or focusing on solutions, then you understand why they're there. And then you've got the last classification, which is limited exclusions, which is for those funds where they're really just taking out a few of the most contentious stocks, so perhaps armaments, tobacco, one or two companies that have got very bad reputations, for example. So that's really the classification system.
So why does this classification system make more sense than, say, a ratings system?
Okay, so if you're a financial advisor and you're sitting in front of a client, how useful is it to be able to say, well, you could have one of these, which is an A, B, C or a D or a 74 out of 100 or whatever, compared to having the conversation saying, okay, so are you interested in sustainability? So that's environmental and social issues. You're using real words and you're drawing out what the client's actually interested in themselves. And you can understand that if the client says they're really interested in sustainability issues like climate change, like biodiversity loss, like human rights issues and how we deal with waste and that kind of stuff, it obviously makes sense to go for funds that say that's what they do. So don't look for a rating that some other company has come up with, some marking system. That's not to say those systems don't have a place, they do. But if you're an intermediary, you've got to understand what the fund's for and match it to what the client cares about.
Right, and how often is the list reviewed and updated?
So we do an annual write-out to all fund managers and we ask them to review their information and send us updated information. So all of our information comes direct from fund managers. So we're not looking to change it. We want to make it be a resource as if a financial advisor is talking to the fund managers themselves and getting their information. So we then are just taking that information and creating categorizations around what the fund manager has said. Okay, we'll have a look at the fund and we'll make sure that it makes sense. But really it's just about making the whole process easier for intermediaries.
While the tool is very useful, this is not the only initiative that you're involved with. You're also doing a lot more other things in the industry. Tell our viewers a bit more about that.
Yes. So, okay, for a really long time, I've been involved in lots of different things. So one of the areas I've put a lot of effort into over the years is an organisation called UCSIF, which is the Industry Association for Sustainable Investment. So I've been a director of there twice. Number of years helping them just push generically the industry just to raise the profile of the sector and bringing sustainability into investment. More recently, I've been doing quite a lot of work with regulators and others and policy work. So, for example, at the moment, I'm on the DLAG, so you've got the sustainability disclosure requirements and labelling regime that's being worked on at the moment. So I'm on the advisory group for that. British Standards also doing work in this area, so I'm on the steering group for that. Lots of media work, lots of working with different intermediaries and just trying to help people understand what these funds are for. And that goes from policy level right the way to, if you like, talking to media and others, just to help people understand what they're actually for.
Thanks, Julia. So you really are on the front line of all things sustainable investing. My final question is, if I'm a financial advisor, I haven't been trained in this area. I'm very conscious of the whole criticism of greenwashing. How do I go about starting my clients, my investors on the sustainable investing journey?
Sure. So the first thing to realise is that these investments are aimed at focusing on real life issues, and they really bring the real world into investments in a way that other areas don't, because they're considering additional issues that most funds overlook. And the way I like to try and explain this now is really with a 4-step process. So if you start by understanding that these funds are designed to look at different things. So 4 main areas or issues that they focus on: environmental, social, governance, and ethical. So you've got 4 main areas and lots of subsets that sit beneath those. And then there's 3 different ways that funds can look at those issues. They can either say, well, okay, we're going to drop out some areas, we're going to exclude them. We're going to focus on companies that have got good strategy, so positives. So we can focus on either real change agents or just leaders in a sector. Or you can engage with companies and try and encourage change, and that's the whole stewardship agenda. So 3 different ways they can look at those 4 different groups of issues. And then there's 2 things that we've really got to do as investors. We've got to direct money towards companies that are really leading the charge and enabling good things to happen. So those solutions companies that are building new things that will help us move towards a greener future. And then we've also got to encourage a transition in the existing companies so that they move away from doing things that are damaging the planet and our futures, and drive them to focus more on sustainable strategies that will enable them to survive long term as well. So 2 tasks investors have got to look at. And then the final thing is to remember that these are investments. So all of these funds have got to deliver performance too. So for any advisor who's worried that these are a bit mamby-pamby or something, absolutely not. These funds don't get to survive if they underperform any more than any other fund does. So they are genuine investments, but they're just done with their eyes very wide open, blinkers off, understanding our context in the world and where things are going.
Julia, thanks so much. That's a brilliant summary, and it's brilliant that you've agreed to work with Fidelity, bringing this tool to our financial advisors.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for watching. If you're looking for more information, visit the Sustainable Investing section on our website. Goodbye.